This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 203. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Grace.
Hello.
Godra.
Hi.
And Tam.
Hello.
Thalen is not with us this week because power is apparently not a thing that he has in his life right now. So last week I talked briefly at the very tail end of the episode that this week the next Destiny 2 expansion was coming out. And that happened on on Tuesday. And I have played quite a bit of it.
I have played a small amount of it.
So first off, one of the things that I have to give them kudos for is the fact that you don't have to have played Curse of Osiris to start playing Warmind. So it's not like Taken King or Rise of Iron were, where they were kind of tied to other things. Now, on my main character, that's not a big deal, because I played through Curse of Osiris. On my alts, I never did. I guess that should say how not into Curse of Osiris I was that, I didn't run up all three characters, whereas I ran up all three characters on two different platforms for the base game. And I've been enjoying myself enough that, I've even leveled a second character to 30 at this point. Still haven't finished the story content, but I can at least start doing things. Nothing is necessarily gated behind the finishing of the story for your alts, it seems. So, I can, after finishing the first story mission of the expansion, it seems like my alts have full access to everything, which is kind of nice. My biggest complaint is that it is really short. There are a total of 5 quests in the expansion, and it's kind of along the same lines of Rise of Iron as far as length of content, and it was enjoyable. But during the entirety of the story missions, I don't even know how to really put it into words, but there's a false sense of priority and a false sense of epicness applied to what you're doing. And it makes me wonder if it was originally intended to be much longer, because the way the NPCs talk about, the sequence of events that's going on, it makes it sound like it's some arch nemesis that you're going off to fight, and it's a thing that you only knew about for the first time 30 minutes before then. So that's kind of weird. It
seems kind of unfortunate, since that was one of the strong points of Destiny 2 over Destiny 1 when it comes to the main storyline.
Right. And honestly, I would say the gravity of the storyline is actually less than even the expansions of the original Destiny. Even Dark Below or House of Wolves had more story meat than this does. That's not to say there's not a lot of interesting things that happen, but you're presented with a human plot MacGuffin in the form of Anna Bray.
I like her.
Who is cool, but it's this person that you've not encountered up until this point, but apparently has, not to get into too many details, because I don't know how many of you will actually play this content, but she has special powers, for lack of a better term. I really like her, and she's a character of lore, one that we thought was dead.
I mean, is she a guardian? Maybe she was.
Well, no, she is a guardian. She was always a guardian. But during the Battle of Twilight Gap, she supposedly basically burned out her light. using, like, in a final stand where there's a quest in the original Destiny for No Time to Explain, where you have to go to the Battle of Twilight Gap map and collect.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah, no, collect these pools of light. And the pools of light were supposedly left where she burned so bright as a gunslinger that, like, she permanently scorched the earth and has left pools of light as a remnant. And supposedly after that battle, she just fell. That's the official lore, but they've either retconned or it didn't actually happen because now we're encountering her. And I guess there's a little part of that bothers me because, you know, you encounter Zavala and Zavala doesn't seem to be shocked that she's still alive. Whereas the other storyline would lead you to believe that everyone thought she was dead. So, I don't know. That's a little weird to reconcile. They are doing something interesting with the enemies that you fight. So you're fighting, obviously, the leftover Cabal that are still in the solar system, but you're also fighting these Hive that are like a different branch of the Hive. And it's everything that I've seen so far, like rumors that these are from someone called Nokris, which you only ever encounter in the original game in one little place, where outside Oryx's room, there's 2 statues on either side of the throne room. And one is of Crota, which we encountered, and the other one is of Nokris. So it leads you to believe that it was also a child of Oryx, but when your ghost scans the thing, it says something about that it indicates that all records of Nokris were stricken from the world grave. So why did the Hive disown this person? And why were there a bunch of Hive frozen in the polar caps on Mars that seem to be of that strain, for lack of a better term? I don't know what a group of Hive is called.
A hive?
Swarm?
A hive, a swarm? Whatever. Yeah. So that's 2 different groups of Hive that you're encountering in Destiny 2. There's the folks that you're encountering on Titan that are associated with Savathun, which is the sister of Oryx. And now there's this other group that is associated with someone called Nokris that we don't know much about other than potentially is a child of Oryx. I think the biggest thing with this expansion is, on the negative end, it is grindier than the game was previously. Or at least the light grind is slower, significantly slower. I did all of my easy milestones and have barely put a dent in getting between 345 and 385, which is the actual absolute cap. So I think they're wanting to slow the grind down for people. Now, it doesn't really seem to be limiting what I can do yet. The other big takeaway from Warmind is it's as intricate as the Dreadnought was in Taken King, as in there's tons of hidden areas. And some of it leads me to believe that there's probably going to be quests associated with it. Because I know at some point I talked about the crazy computer quest in Rise of Iron, especially in the Wrath of the Machine raid, where you had to like jump on specific things to match a pattern, and it would unlock like a series of monitors throughout the zone, and you would do something with that, and ultimately unlocked a place where you could get a weapon. Inside the Warmind area, there are a bunch of interactable monitors, and they've not actually done anything for me yet, but I have a feeling that somewhere there's another thing that you interact with that will trigger them to turn on, and you need to do something with them. There are also all these hidden encrypted fragments throughout the map that, when unlocked, give you resources and a chance at, like, an item you can turn into weapons. So there's a lot of little intricate things you can do, which is what I've spent most of my time doing, is running around and doing the little minor things.
Yeah, I haven't gotten all the way through the story yet, but at least from what I've seen and what I've read, like, it doesn't, other than having slowed down light gain, it doesn't feel particularly game changing. Like, it still feels very much the same loop.
Yeah, it really does.
And so, like, I want to get through it, and I want to see the story, which I guess doesn't actually take that long. But I'm a little concerned that, as unsatisfying as Curse of Osiris was, that this doesn't really feel substantively different to me. Now, I haven't gotten through the story yet, so it might feel differently then, but it doesn't seem like it.
No, I mean, I would say the story... The part that makes the story better than Curse of Osiris is the fact that you're not dealing with the repetitive nature of the Infinite Forest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like the zone, and I like the story already, like, much, much better than Curse of Osiris. But just the core loop of gameplay doesn't feel too different yet.
No, and it really hasn't been. Like, there's some stuff that I've not been able to successfully do, but there's a thing called escalation protocol that you've probably encountered this already when you've been going through an area that had other players, and there'd be like a beacon shooting up into the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thing called escalation protocol. And what happens is someone activates it, and then people in the zone can either do it or ignore it, kind of like a public event. But it's kind of like a horde mode, where all of a sudden you start getting bombarded with very difficult hive. And so you'll go through several waves, and then you need to stand in this field while stuff spawns in and keep it clear so that you can deactivate a series of crystals. And then a big boss will spawn in, and you have a timer to kill said boss. And then another beacon will activate, and you have to run over to it and do some more waves, and then a different boss will spawn in. And I think if you make it through 3 rounds of that, you start getting progressively better drops, like Nightfall style loot drops. And the biggest thing that I've seen so far is it's difficult enough that, like, I've only ever successfully made it to the second round and have never cleared that boss. So I don't know, like, I'm not sure how you actually organize for it, because unfortunately you can't queue into it because it's just out in the open world, and the biggest group of players that you can run around in the open world with is 3 players. So it requires 3 groups of 3 players, or at least that's what it's tuned for.
That's weird.
Is 9 players. So it seems like a poor design. Like, maybe given time, people will be just running that constantly. But the most players that I've ever managed to get engaged in it is around 6 players, and we can get through the first boss, but the difficulty ramps up as you go into the second set of bosses, and it is difficult enough that it's slow for us to chew through it. Whereas I think if we had a full 9 players, it would not be a big deal at all. Like, we would be able to get through to the 3rd wave. And so, I don't know, like, I've been trying it, but I've also not been necessarily prioritizing that, because so far I've not had a ton of luck with it. There's a quest chain that opens up once that you've beat the story mode, and I'm slowly working my way through that, because I believe it leads to, like, an exotic weapon. That's the other thing that's happened that isn't necessarily tied to the expansion, but it's tied to the patch that came with the expansion, is there are now Masterwork exotics, and those happen vastly different than the other Masterworks in that to get a normal Masterwork, you just either randomly get the weapon to drop with the Masterwork perk, or you grind enough Masterwork items to get resources to turn a weapon or a piece of armor into Masterwork quality. But these are so far, the only ones I've gotten to drop are off public quests. And you'll get an item that's a schematic that you add to an existing exotic that you've already got. And then that unlocks a quest. So the first step in the ones that I've unlocked is get a number of precision kills with that weapon. And I am not sure what that number is, because it's probably 100 kills, 100 precision kills, because it's ticking up slow enough that it's probably 1% per kill. And then I don't know if that's it or if that unlocks a different thing. But there's essentially a quest chain that starts for that exotic weapon to turn it into a Masterwork, which in many cases actually adds additional perks to the weapon. Unlike so a Masterwork weapon, really there's only two things that make it worthwhile. There's some kind of a random stat boost from a certain pool of stat boosts, but the big thing is when you kill mobs, there's a chance of dropping a mini orb of light, which happens often enough that you can greatly reduce your downtime for supers.
Oh yeah, those things are super useful.
It's amazing. I've found myself leaning towards the weapons that I have for Masterwork, even though they may or may not have been the weapons that I would choose by nature, but it's super useful because it really does reduce the downtime on those supers so that you can have them up more often. So that aspect of the exotics is going to be nice as well, but also each individual exotic has different things added to it that's, I guess, designed to improve the core function of that exotic.
Sweet Business is actually good now, for instance.
Yes, Sweet Business is actually good now. The Masterwork version of Sweet Business improves the faults of Sweet Business. But unfortunately, I've not gotten a core to drop for one of those yet. I think I've gotten 3 weapons started from just doing public quests. I've got the crazy repulsor cannon portal gun looking shotgun, the Darcy, which is apparently godlike with the Masterwork on it, and the pistol that looks like Red Death from the first Destiny. I forget the name of it. It is a pulse rifle pistol. I don't know. I've been enjoying myself. I just don't know how long it will hold my attention. Because there's got to be something that really hooks me. And I'm not sure if I see it yet. But it already feels like a better expansion than Curse was. And that's honestly mostly because Infinite Forest seems so repetitive. And Anabray's cooler than Osiris. Or Brother Vance, because Brother Vance really creeped me out. Brother Vance was the creepiest of fanboys. Another game that's come out recently is Battletech. And Tam, I know you've been playing a significant amount of that.
I've been playing a whole ton of this game. I have a love-hate relationship with this game. It is super, super good right up until it irks the shit out of you. And it loves to do this thing.
So I've heard there's no difficulty slider for starters.
There are no difficulty settings. And it's by the people who did Shadowrun, which may give you some idea of what you're dealing with here. As in Shadowrun, if you're playing on on higher difficulty settings, bad stuff can just happen to you, and you might just die. Just straight up die. Whoops, lucky crit, your guy died. And that can happen here too. But in Shadowrun, there's difficulty settings so that you can not have that happen. And they're completely absent here. And not for the better. Because it's very difficult to game over. Even if you completely lose a mission and fail, you go back to the mission screen and keep on going. Because your main character can only be injured and can't die, and you can get new pilots. But it's also possible, like the game's difficulty is high enough that if this happens to you, you may as well reload a save because you're probably not coming back from it. And I find that kind of frustrating as somebody who really likes the coming design, like the sort of game design theory that's happening lately of, hey, let's make these things, let's make your decisions meaningful, and even if you fail, keep on going because that's interesting. And Battletech is trying to do that, but it's really just, oh, something bad happened, reload your save. Like, don't waste time, reload your save. And that's not as interesting as it could be. And it bugs me that that's the case, because the other piece of this is that this game is fantastic. Like, I am a huge fan of this game in most cases because it's super fun. It's got a really, really interesting kind of well-developed progression and equipment system. The complaints that I've seen that it's too slow are accurate. You've kind of got to do a bunch to not have that happen, like not spend forever watching animations. But it's also a turn-based strategy game, so I kind of expect it to be a little bit slower paced. But by default, basically, Harebrained Schemes figured out really, really, really good modeling and animation and so on, and does not want you to forget it. Like, we are going to show off our animations and our character models up close in lavish character angles as much as humanly possible.
But maybe you should turn that down.
Maybe you should turn that off entirely, because even completely off entirely, there's still a lot of times where it just spends a bunch of time showing off whatever it feels like, whether or not that's something you care about. Hey, check out this. We're going to zoom. You blow up a building, and we're going to zoom up super close on the building that you blew up. Sure, right? What's the problem here?
Explosions.
Yeah, let's look real close at this thing that you've just exploded, which is mostly just an expanding cloud of smoke, frankly, but irrelevant. But the lack of difficulty settings is really annoying to me, because I don't necessarily want to be at the edge of my seat, barely making it out every single turn. I don't want every single turn of a fairly lengthy strategy game to be, did I barely survive or not?
That ends up just wearing you down over time.
Yeah, it's fatiguing. I'm tired. I get tired of having that happen. And so I need milk runs. I need easy. I need some easy missions interspersed. You need to have pacing, but you never know when that's going to be. You can't be like, hey, I need an easy mission. I just need to make a little bit of money. There's descriptors to theoretically show you how difficult the mission that you're doing is supposed to be, but it's not good. Like, I have no idea what those symbols actually correlate to, because the end result is they mostly just aren't helpful. Like, here's a 2-star or skull or whatever mission. I cruised through that with, basically nothing, no problems. And then here's another 2-star mission that leaves me just a flaming wreck. I come out of here with 3 people that are in med bay for like a month, and I don't know why. So, but on
is
the other
that
hand,
because of the difficulty is different, or is that because of luck?
A little bit of both, but like sometimes it'll be like, okay, you are going to go up. Here's a 2-star mission in which you go up against like 4 enemies, which you've got a team of 4, and that's roughly balanced. Here's another one where you walk in and you can pick off these. The terrain is such that you can pick people off one by one in this theoretical 2-star mission. Great. Here's a different one where it's the same thing, except instead of 3 medium and 1 heavy mech, you're fighting like 12 light mechs. and the weight of and you're in the open, so it's like the weight of fire is just so off that
So
you
is
just
this a
get
game
flattened.
Is this a game that favors small light mechs?
No.
Or
Mostly no.
okay.
They are actually kind of impressively dedicated to classic Battletech in a lot of ways, including the way in which Battletech / MechWarrior has an opinion about the correlation between size and goodness. Bigger is always better. Battletech actually manages the video game actually manages to get around that a little bit by giving you some justification for not just getting the biggest possible mechs, but you can also just mitigate that, in which case just bring the biggest possible mechs. But small light mechs are bad mostly, which is kind of where the problem comes in, because you have to worry about the health and lives and etc. of all of your team, and this is important and this is fine. But what this means is there are certain strategies that you're not going to take, like throw a sacrificial light mech just as a spotter. Like, that's a bad idea. You don't want to do that. But the enemy will absolutely do that to you.
Oh, because every mech you lose is a massive outlay of resource?
Yes. Losing a mech or a pilot is a huge resource loss for you, but enemies don't care.
So ultimately, enemies get to play the way you would prefer to play.
Well, I mean, enemies just get to play much more recklessly than you get to play. And that's touchy. Like, it's not a good feeling when you're like, hey, I'm not doing that thing because it exposes me to a bunch of cost, but why do my enemies not have to worry about that? Or why wouldn't my enemies realistically not just throw lives away?
Yeah. Where's them trying to protect their costs?
Yeah, exactly. Now, on the other hand, it also means that they're susceptible to tactics that I'm not, because you get to determine the kind of means of your approach. So they don't get to pick where you're coming from, but you do. So like, that's interesting, and that's a thing that you can do and they can't. But it doesn't help the like feels bad moment of I just had my nice mech taken out by some totally sacrificial unit, and it was super costly to me, but they don't care. Like, I punished them hugely for throwing away a mech that way, but also they don't care. On the other hand, I really do like the interplay between different weapons. The terrain and movement are really important, and you can do a lot. You can do a ton with them, because you've got Fog of War, which will obscure mechs, and so you can't target anything that you can't see, but you can also see radar blips. And if you can see a radar blip, one of the skills you can get will let you reveal that radar blip. So now you can see it, which is really neat. It lets you do a bunch of really interesting things. As far as that's what I'm looking for. Like, you can't see me, but I can shoot you with my ridiculous anime style missile salvos. Because I have a character who's spotting for me, basically. And that's cool. I like that a lot. But I wound up restarting my campaign because I got into fights where it's like I won, and I technically came out slightly ahead money-wise, but I couldn't really pull ahead, and if a mission went particularly badly, then it was extremely bad for me, because it's just like the only game over condition is your is you run out of money. Like, time comes to pay your bills and you don't have the money. That's the only game over condition.
Oh, seems rough.
Yeah, and it does mean that you can lose missions, or you can get into a mission and be like, oh, actually, this was a terrible idea. I don't want to be involved in this at all, and just leave it. And the penalty, you take a small faction hit and you don't get paid for it. But so yeah, I like the game a lot. It has a tendency to frustrate me, but not enough to not want to play it anymore.
So do you find yourself getting frustrated enough to walk away from it for a while?
I did before I restarted my campaign with some more knowledge. I was really, really frustrated. I had a mission where I had taken out my enemies down to one badly damaged mech left that was just a mess. And that one mech, I was one turn away from blowing it up. That mech fired on 3 of my mechs and headshot all 3 of them. And it was just, I went from I totally won this, I totally crushed this mission to I barely walked away because 3 people are dead. And like, that's a bad feeling. And that's one of those things that like Shadowrun lets you turn off. You can say, no, don't do stupid crit nonsense at me. And Shadowrun will be like, okay, but I don't have that option here.
It just seems weird that they didn't add that in.
It seems like an incredible oversight.
Or they just didn't have enough time to put that feature in before they'd already said they were launching.
They were real dedicated to duplicating the tabletop rules as much as possible.
Yes. And I think it is a dedication to the tabletop rules, and I don't think it serves them. And I feel like they should have learned from Shadowrun that you don't necessarily want to mimic the tabletop rules perfectly.
Yeah.
Or at least allow that to be an option.
Yeah. And in Shadowrun, it's totally an option. If you want to play horrific, just by the book, horrifically deadly Shadowrun, you can. I don't want to play that game, but it's there. It's there in Shadowrun. But if you want to enjoy the story and enjoy the mechanics without worrying with every click, is this the turn in which I get a lucky crit or somebody gets a lucky crit on me and I die? But I do like the other thing that there's a mechanic that I feel like is missing, and maybe I just haven't unlocked it yet. But a very effective strategy is focus fire a single. I mean, just like in every other situation, focus fire a single thing until it is not a problem anymore. Is a very effective way to keep yourself relatively safe, especially if that one thing is the thing allowing other things to shoot at you because it's a spotter. That's huge. But enemies will do that to you as well, and that can be really rough. And what I would like is if there were a mechanic to allow you to like jam somebody's targeting system. So it's like this mech can't be targeted for some amount of time. Like that would be great. But it is really, really cool, like customizing my mechs to do the things I want them to do and solve problems in ways that I particularly enjoy solving problems. And there's a surprising amount of balance between weapon types as well, which I think is hard to do and cool.
That's fun.
Like there's a good reason to take tons and tons of missiles or tons and tons of lasers or whatever.
But maybe you shouldn't put missiles on everything.
I mean, maybe you shouldn't. There's definitely downsides, but that's what I think is really interesting. Is that's part of the mechanism. Is hey, how do you want to handle heat buildup? It's like laser weapons are super accurate but generate a ton of heat. This is fine as long as you have some other answer for what you're going to do with all that heat. And like projectile weapons, similarly, are pretty good, but if you fire them multiple turns in a row, they have recoil, and so you stop being accurate. And so there are these really interesting trade-offs.
Clearly, you need a flamethrower.
That's also a thing.
To get rid of all that heat.
Oh, you can, well...
I think a flamethrower would generate heat.
Flamethrowers generate heat for other people.
We're throwing the heat away from us. It totally makes sense, guys.
It works in Final Fantasy.
But yeah, all in all, I also it's got a neat story. I like this. I like where the story is going. The missions are interesting and varied, which I think I like a lot. I really enjoy when games just have interesting or clever mission design. There's lots and lots of bonus objectives that will get you more money, so you want to do them. But also that means that you're spending more time fighting, and maybe that's not great. You can take off all the armor on your mech to put more weapons on, in which case you'll blow something up really good. but maybe that makes your mech really fragile. But yeah, it has a whole ton of really interesting mechanics. Playing with big mechs is fun. There's like this whole locational thing, which is cool. Like where you hit things is important.
That's part of the earlier mentioned dedication to the tabletop rules.
Yes. It does mean that you sometimes ask the question, like, what does it take to blow up an enemy mech? And the answer is sometimes a lot.
Which is what makes it all the worse when it gets a random crit and your mech blows up.
Yeah. And I mean, granted, in some cases you can have the same thing happen to you, where same thing benefit you, where like, oh, I got a lucky crit and now that guy just died without me having to do very much. But it's also, I don't know, like that's not as good a feeling as having your person die randomly is a bad feeling.
Yeah.
Like it's technically even, but because it costs you so much more when something bad happens to your guy than when you crit somebody else, it feels way worse when it happens to you, even if it happens roughly equivalently.
So, to segue from one turn-based game to another turn-based game, Ash, I know you have been playing in quotes Pillars of Eternity 2?
I feel like
it's not a turn-based game.
I feel like turn-based now needs to be in quotes too.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, Pillars of Eternity 2 also came out this past Tuesday, because I guess it's that time of the year.
I mean, yeah, I think a lot of things have just gotten bumped and they're all going to bunch up for a while.
Seems that way. Got more stuff comes out next week even. But Pillars of Eternity 2, a direct sequel to Pillars of Eternity 1. It positioned a little oddly in that it takes place 5 years later. It also asks you what you did in Pillars 1. There's like a bunch of preset histories to pick from. It's not like Mass Effect 2 where they just automatically assume you did the worst things.
That's good.
Although that is an option in character creation. You can just say, I did the worst things.
I am bad. I should feel bad.
They highly recommend you don't do this, but it is an option. But playing has to be in quotes because mostly what I did was mess around with the systems in it, both exploring the multi-class systems a bit and exploring how modding works, because they made almost all of their code, so to say, is in JSON. So how abilities work and things, they're real easy to change. They're real easy to override. And so I've been messing around with that more than I've been actually playing the game. Part of this is because I do actually want to finish Pillars 1 before I play Pillars 2. Even though Pillars 2 is such a mechanically better game that I'm not sure that's actually going to happen. There are a few things, generally an almost complete elimination of per rest abilities. So it's a little more like Tyranny in that you can actually use your fun stuff in every fight. Also borrowed from Tyranny is the fact that some text is, highlighted and you can mouse over it and see what it actually means.
This is such a great... Battletech does this too, and this is super great for RPGs.
Every game with a lot of text should do this going forward. Like I said when we talked about Tyranny, and I still believe it. The party is 5 instead of 6, which is a little easier to manage. There is an AI system rivaling FF12, except you don't even need to earn all the things, you can just do them. And in general, things are just better, engine-wise. One of the more interesting things they added was a multi-class system, in which you pick 2 classes and sort of progress them both at the same time. This slows down your progression a little bit, so it doesn't end up dramatically more powerful than a single class. I think in some cases, single classes are just better, but that's varies by class. They're not all equally balanced, so on and so forth. And I really like it a lot. One of the reasons I jumped straight into modding is that they added a shapeshifter-focused subclass for Druid. And it's cool. I like it. I think I could do better, so I am working on that one.
So will it be easy to release your class when time comes and someone pesters you to get a copy? Okay.
They did a smart thing in that you can have an override folder. It'll just read all the files in the override folder and overwrite anything that is referenced there instead of taking from the core files. So mod installation and uninstallation is going to be really easy for this game.
They learned from BioWare and Bethesda even.
Yep.
And that works well.
The only thing modding wise that's going to be difficult is adding graphics of any sort is going to be nearly impossible as it currently stands. But adding ability, changing how things work, all that sort of thing is fairly easy. I don't really have that much more to say about it yet.
So I assume there's going to be like Steam Workshop and stuff available potentially?
Who knows? It doesn't seem like there's going to be, it's not set up for that sort of thing, but it could be. As it is, there's a Nexus site already.
Yeah. I think there's a Nexus site for everything. I mean,
like the first game's basically complete lack of mod support, it had a Nexus site.
Like, I support this notion because I greatly prefer to install things for mods through one client rather than manually doing it myself. So, except for in the case of a lot of Bethesda games, you still have to do a lot of stuff manually because you require some script launcher to actually launch things. But you can at least configure that now in Nexus.
Also mod order.
Yeah.
Which may be a problem with Pillars 2 modding, because as far as I know, there's no way to set that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think the last topic we have for tonight is Magic the Gathering Commander. Y'all played a game the other day.
We did, because I had to find some other deck to use my three Wolf Moon sleeves on.
I love that you have those.
And you had 100 of them?
Absolutely. They came in a pack of 50.
I do like that, like, Eclipse sleeves now have packs of 100, because even for a standard deck, that's a better option than buying a pack of 50.
I thought the Eclipse sleeves were sold in packs of 80, which was really annoying.
No, they've started switching them over to 100.
Nice.
Yeah, because I recently got several packs of them. So, tell me about the ordeals you went through with this Commander game.
Oh, where do we begin? So I guess I should probably begin this one. So I have built a Commander deck so that I can enjoy playing Magic, because I mostly don't. But I do like some of the interactions that happen in Magic. Those are fun to me. But the actual act of trying to win at playing Magic is not at all fun for me. So I have a deck that lets me just have interesting things happen. The outcome of any given game is 100% irrelevant to me.
You did almost win.
Sure. I
a
mean,
lot of us almost won.
Statistically, that seems like it will probably happen sometimes.
I mean, Commander is a much more political game than it is anything else.
Yeah, so, and even beyond that, though, like, it's interesting to go through the process of playing this deck with Tam, because it's gotten much better at its stated goal of being fun and interactive without, like, avoiding things that are not fun. Like in the earlier versions of the deck, like, it had a lot of things that would allow everyone just to put their biggest thing on the board, and it would really warp the gameplay a lot. But that wasn't necessarily fun. It was just, like, wild.
Okay, I gotta ask, what on earth was that pounding?
Sorry, that was my son saying hi.
That's awesome. I was like, is somebody trying to break into your house?
It happens. But yeah, so the other thing is, I don't want to have to make decisions. Like, that's not what I'm here for. Because me making decisions, especially like, oh, who am I going to attack, etc., they're not the goal of the deck. It is not the goal of the deck in any way to try to win, because I don't want to play that way. I'm not interested in trying to win at Magic. Partly because it's not going to happen, because the gap is so huge, but also it's not a thing I want to do. But what this deck does is says, okay, if I can get this deck into a state where it mostly just plays itself, like, oh, I have a card in my hand that I can play, I'm gonna play it, and nothing else matters. And, like, that's ideal. That's kind of the ideal case for me. And so I have worked to try to get the deck into that state. And so mostly what it does is set up questions that other people need to figure out answers to, or not, but as the case may be.
So your deck is basically a monkey wrench in deck form.
Yes, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle generator. It creates questions, and people have to figure out. It creates situations, and people have to figure out what to do with that. And it's pretty fun. It's fun for me to play, because winning is not relevant. Like, the worst case scenario of the deck is I lose early and then don't get to do anything for the next hour or whatever.
I think I actually feel like that's the worst case scenario of all Commander.
Yeah. And
but it almost seems like that's kind of a thing that people go into the game realizing as well, because if you knock someone out, you kind of know how lousy it is to knock someone out early like that.
Well, and that's sort of the other piece of it is one of the things that I have noticed playing and watching and so on competitive games where there is a competition element is there's a balance between playing competitively and allowing everyone else at the table to actually have fun. And it is very easy to cross that threshold and be like, hey, I am good enough at winning that no one wants to play this game with me anymore because it's not fun for them. And similarly, like in Commander, it is not difficult to come up with a super competitive deck. It's just not fun to play.
I feel like there's a lot of decks in Magic that fit into that category where they're just not fun to play against. Like, they're never going to be fun to play against. Scarab God is not fun to play against.
Yeah.
If you don't have an answer to it to remove it, you might as well just concede because it's going to resurrect everything from your graveyard and use it against you. Various mill decks in the past have been frustrating to the point where I just didn't want to play against it.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't necessarily, and in those cases, it doesn't even necessarily have to be good. It just has to be not fun. But I think there's also a problem that comes in when this is a clearly optimal strategy and also it's not fun to play against, which has a super fast cooling effect on desire to play a game. It's like, oh, the optimal strategy is also the least fun. It makes me think of Kodra's MLP card game experience.
Oh,
well,
I know which one you're talking about now.
Yeah. It was like, oh, this is an optimal strategy, but it makes me hate this game.
And honestly, like, this thing you're talking about is interesting because in a face-to-face shop environment, it to some extent mitigates itself. Either that shop becomes hyper-competitive and everybody plays like that, or the people that are playing the degenerate decks just can't ever get anybody to play against them.
Yeah.
But, like, in an online game...
Well, in an online game, or when you have a small enough group of people that's not feasible. Because if you have, like, a relatively small local community, and this is something I've seen with Infinity, if you have a relatively small local community, what can happen is, somebody figures out a really good strategy, nobody knows how to play it, and then the game just dies because nobody wants to play this game anymore.
Yeah.
Or people do continue to play it because they want to play games and that's the game in town, but they're not actually having a ton of fun because they just lose to the same thing every time.
Yeah, back in the day when I used to actually go to shops often, and it didn't matter what the game was, like, there were certain people when they walked through the door that, like, would cause other people to suddenly have things that they needed to do.
I really enjoy, though, like... What I really like about playing Magic is watching decks evolve and like watching them get tuned. And it was really interesting watching the progression of this deck and like watching you play test it and revise it and play test it and revise it. And that's sort of the core of what I really like about card games. And it was interesting to see that in the context of not trying to be competitive, but trying to be, just
compelling in some different way. Yeah. I mean, that's how I play almost all of my games at this point. Like any game where I'm playing against other people, it's 100% how I build infinity lists as well. Like, is this an interesting experience for the other person or the other people involved? And yeah, a big part of edits that I make to that deck are in service to not is it any better at winning, but is it more fun to experience? Because if it's not, then there's no point.
You might want to replace a win machine with knowledge pool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's the thing is like every time it's generally very interesting until some particular card combination appears that isn't fun. And so at that point, I remove the cards that aren't fun and replace them with cards that hopefully are. But it's a delicate balance because I have to watch the interactions at basically every turn of the game, and which cards are funny, but which cards will make somebody just want to tear their hair out when they happen, and like which combinations are interesting versus not. But a lot of what I try to do, or a lot of what I'm trying to do with that deck is ruin everybody else's plans, but do so in a way that doesn't feel bad, which is a really difficult balance to strike. It's pretty easy to come up with, there's decks that win on I ruin your day in a not fun way. And what I'm trying to do here is I want to ruin your plans in a way that gives you interesting new plans to try.
Mm-hmm. It's really fun. Like, I really enjoy playing Commander with you and with that against that deck.
Well, I think we've kind of reached the natural end of the show. Do we have anything else we want to talk about?
Home Insight comes out next week. You should play Home Insight.
Home Insight?
Home Insight is the spiritual successor to Stories, the Path of Destinies. Which again, I've complained that is the most generic name ever.
Right, yes.
It's a game about reliving the last day of this kingdom that you're trying to save, and making different decisions and solving it like a choose-your-own-adventure book. The catch in Stories was that when you made it to your bad end, you learned some things, and you could use those things to make different decisions later. And it seems like they're taking that to its conclusion here, in which you can tell some other characters involved in the game some of those things that you learned, and maybe make them make different decisions and see what chains off from that.
Huh.
Looks cool. Canadian dev, comes out next week.
Cool.
It was really fun at PAX.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.